Hello, my DIY home buying friends. This is episode 40, and starting today, every 10th episode, I'm going to do a Q&A because as I've been building this podcast and channel, I've connected with so many incredible folks that want to represent themselves, getting lots and lots of questions from you. And I think that every 10 episodes is probably a good rhythm to just stop, check in, make sure that I am answering the things that are most pressing to you as you seek to save 2 to 3% by representing yourself in real estate. If you're new here, my name is Nick. I am the host of the show and founder of the DIY Homebuyer Academy, where my mission is to empower and educate you to represent yourself so that you can save at least 2 to 3% on your next home by cutting out costly buyer agents. If that's something that you're even remotely interested in, I'm going to ask you to do this. Hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the content that comes out on this channel. It could literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. And if you know others that would resonate with this kind of stuff, people that are thinking about buying a home, well, you could be their very best friend by helping them save tens of thousands of dollars simply by sharing this episode or sharing this channel with them. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. I have got 10 questions that we are going to hit that go all the way from navigating seller agents to what do I do post-close. I'm going to be as concise as possible while also bringing clarity to these issues. I imagine, though, that it's going to create more questions. So if you have questions, drop them in the comments or shoot me an email, nick@DIYHomebuyerAcademy.com, and I will either get back to you right away or I will flag them for episode number 50. All right, let's start with question number 1, which is, when dealing directly with a listing agent as an unrepresented buyer, how can I ensure I am not at a disadvantage, especially since the listing agent represents the seller's interests? This is really, really important to remember that the listing agent has a financial duty to the home seller to get them the best possible deal. So they are trying to get the seller the highest price, best possible terms, and they do not represent your financial interests as a self-represented buyer. They are to treat you as a customer, not as a client. And in fact, I say that right up front, you should have a non-agency disclosure that you sign with the listing agent that specifies they do not represent your financial interests. And with that in mind, there's a few things that you can do to make sure that you are not at a disadvantage. One is that you can ask good questions, because while the listing agent doesn't represent you and while they can't give you information about the seller's financial position, they do owe you honesty, and they have to disclose any known issues with the home. So ask about things like foundation, roof, leaks, major repairs, if permits were pulled. Any of that kind of information the listing agent should know, and if they know it, they've got to tell you. It's actually a legal requirement to disclose anything that they know to be material fact about the home. So ask good questions. Also, you can ask questions about why the seller is selling. And what you're really trying to get here is, are they selling because of a relocation, or is there some sort of family situation going on? Are they buying another home? Is there anything that's creating a time crunch where they have to sell this home in order to get on with their lives? Because if you can get to the seller's motivations, that's going to really help once you get into later negotiations. And then finally, you got to be educated about two things in particular. Educated about the home buying process, that is, knowing how the home buying process works, what kind of contingencies you should include in your offer to make sure that you are protected. That's all really important. We'll hit on that in some of the later questions, but we also do deep dives on all of this in the DIY Homebuyer Academy. And then the second piece is you want to be educated about the housing market and about that home in particular, having a good idea of what that home is actually worth and what direction your local market is trending. Are prices going up? Are they coming down? You're going to be looking at things like days on market, and we'll actually get to that in a later question in this episode episode as well. But education is the number one thing that's going to keep you from being at a disadvantage when you, as a self-represented buyer, are working directly with a listing agent. That's why I am so big on consumer education, because education is power. Let's move on to the second question here, which relates to crafting a competitive offer. So I was asked, without an agent to guide me, what are the key elements I should include in my offer to make it stand out in a competitive market while still protecting my interests? Okay, so there's an assumption in this question that it is a competitive market, which makes me think that there are likely going to be other offers that are coming in. And the way to think about self-representation is that you are giving yourself 2 to 3% more buying power than somebody who is coming in with a buyer's agent, because you have one less party to the transaction that needs to be paid. Most any other home buyer that's coming in is going to have a buyer's agent that they are going to ask the seller to make a concession to pay that buyer agent commission, which on average is 2.5%. This is a big deal. Like if we're talking $1 million home, that's $25,000 of buying power that you now have. And you can leverage that to make your offer more attractive, right? Like without any additional cost to you. If you offer $1 million and somebody else with a buyer agent offers $1 million, your offer is $25,000 more attractive to the seller because they net 25 grand more than they would if they were having to pay that buyer's agent. So that's pretty straightforward, right? But you want to figure out financially how to leverage your position as a self-represented buyer to make you more competitive. That's one thing to consider. Other things to consider are, how flexible can you be with closing dates and potential rent back periods? Every seller's situation is different, but this is where I would really ask the listing agent before submitting your offer, what is the ideal close date for the seller? Some people, they want to close as quickly as they possibly can because they need the funds, or they need to get on to the next thing, or they've already moved out of the house. And so if you can have all your financial ducks in a row and be ready to close within 30 days, that can make your offer way more attractive than somebody else that needs 40 or 50 days to close. Also, if you can accommodate the seller with a modest rent back period of a week or two for them to move their things out or to get situated in their next housing, well, that can also be really attractive, especially if you're willing to offer that rent back period for free or for a nominal fee of $50 a day or something like that. And with that rent back period, it is important that you document that and have like a good lease agreement in place. And most MLSs have these standardized forms that outline the rights and responsibilities of the seller once they become a tenant to you as the new owner of the home. So make sure that all of those details are really spelled out. But if you're able to offer a rent back period and the seller needs that in order to transition, that can make your offer really attractive as well. And then when we're talking about financing, cash is always best because there is no appraisal process. There's less likelihood of the deal falling apart when it comes to underwriting or something that the lender catches, or your financing falling out. So cash is great, but not everybody can offer cash. And so therefore, when doing a loan, if you can do a conventional loan, that's going to be more attractive to most sellers than an FHA or a VA or other government-backed loans, because the underwriting requirements for a government-backed loan are far more stringent. The appraisal process tends to be more difficult. So again, sellers look at those loan types as more risky than a conventional loan. Of course, the more money that you're willing to put down with that loan, the more qualified of a buyer you look like to the seller. So that's another thing that you can do, is just really try and put down as much as possible. But you want to show your strength financially as a buyer, just trying to mitigate that idea of risk in the seller's mind. And then finally, you can increase your earnest money amount. Your earnest money is like a good faith deposit that just says, hey, if I back out of this agreement without legal cause, then seller, you get to keep this entire deposit. In most markets, offering 1% of the purchase price is what's typical. So again, on that $1 million home, a $10,000 earnest money deposit would be normal. And you would be saying, hey, if I decide against this home and I don't have inspection contingency or a financing contingency to fall back on, then seller, you get to keep that 10 grand. Well, maybe if it's really competitive, you want to increase that to $25,000. It's entirely up to you what you put there, but obviously the more skin that you have in the game, the more it shows the seller that you're taking this very seriously. So those are things that I would say you should do to make your offer competitive. The one thing I would never recommend is that you waive your inspection contingency. I know that that was very popular and sometimes still is in hot markets, and some buyer agents will tell their clients that they should waive an inspection contingency in order to win a home. I've just seen it happen too many times where somebody overbids for a home, they also waive their inspection contingency, they get possession of the house, and then they come to find that they've got $70,000 worth of foundation issues or water down in the basement. I mean, nightmare kind of stuff. All of that can be mitigated by simply having an inspection contingency. And if a seller will accept your offer only if you have no inspection contingency, to me, that's a big red flag. And this actually leads into one of our next questions. So question number 3 is related to due diligence. And it says, as a DIY buyer, what are the most critical steps or tools you recommend for conducting thorough due diligence on a property, like verifying title, zoning, or potential liens? So the number one thing that I recommend doing is having a thorough whole home inspection. And if your whole home inspector, who's kind of a jack of all trades, but a specialist in none, if they recommend that you have a specialist come and look at potential mold in an attic or in a crawl space, or if they think that there may be issues with plumbing or electrical, then use that inspection contingency period to have those specialists also come out and give you bids so that you know what your approximate costs are if there needs to be a roof replacement or you've got to replace a furnace or air conditioning unit. All of that stuff you should figure out during your due diligence period. So have your inspections, don't skimp on those. Regarding title, zoning, potential liens, you should include some sort of a title contingency. That this just makes sure that there aren't any clouds, encumbrances. Basically, it makes sure that there's no other parties that have a legal claim to the property. And it shows if there are any liens. Sometimes unpaid property taxes will lead to a lien on the property. Sometimes if contractors do work and they didn't get paid, they will have a lien on the property. You need to be aware of those things because all of that has to get paid off by the seller before you take possession, because oftentimes the lien sticks with the property, not with the owner that had it, and you don't want to get stuck with any of that. So by having a title contingency, the title company that you work with will provide you with a full title report. You can always lean on the title company. That's what they're there for. They are a neutral third party. They don't work for the seller specifically. And so you can ask them about anything on the title report. You can ask them the things that you should be concerned about, and they will walk you through it. And then on zoning, this is where you should look on your county records, whether that's a graphic information service. Every county should have one, but you'll be able to pull up property information and look at the zoning for your property, look at the zoning around it. If your property that you're considering buying backs up to green space or land that could otherwise be developed, look and see if it's privately owned, if it's protected. Look to see if there's any potential construction plans, proposed developments. There's nothing worse than buying a home that backs up to green space that you're super excited about. Come to find out, there's plans to put in a massive apartment complex right behind your back property line. So simply do your due diligence by looking on your county's website, doing your property information research, and you can even call the county and ask them if there are development plans. Tell them what you're doing, and you will find somebody within the county, I am certain of it, that is willing to help you out. Let's move to the next question here. Negotiations without an agent. So the question is, can you share specific negotiation strategies for unrepresented buyers to secure a fair price and terms, especially when sellers or their agents might perceive us as less experienced? This is a great question. And I always say that negotiations begin the very first time that you talk with a listing agent. This is why getting the transaction off on the right footing is so important. And I know the first time that you call an agent, you have no idea if you're going to move forward, make an offer on that house or not, but you still have to think of it as a potentiality. And because you could potentially move forward on that house, you really want to get things going on a positive note. And so in your initial communications with the listing agent, be very respectful, professional, courteous. Let them know what your intentions are. Let them know that you are educating yourself on the home buying process, that you're part of something like the DIY Homebuyer Academy, or that you're working one-on-one with me, or that if you need to, you'll hire a real estate attorney. Basically, you want to let them know that just because you're not hiring an agent doesn't mean that you are arrogant about the potential challenges in the home buying process. You want to show that you are taking this seriously. And you also want to show them that you are prepared financially. And so lead with the fact that, yep, I'm pre-approved with this local lender, or I have my proof of funds ready to go. I'm happy to share that with you. If you ask educated questions about the specific property, or let them know some of the reasons why you're potentially interested in it, that also helps legitimize you in their eyes. And that's just a big part of it. Unfortunately, many listing agents are biased against unrepresented buyers because either they're greedy and they see unrepresented buyers as a threat to their livelihood, because most listing agents are buyer agents. So that could be part of it. But many of them have also just had bad experiences where self-represented buyers were unprepared, they were demanding, they were arrogant, and they have this idea of, I don't want to work with somebody like that. And so you need to put the listing agent at ease from the very get-go that you are not going to be a difficult person to work with. You're not going to make their life hard. Nobody wants somebody that's going to make their life hard. So show them you're going to make their life easy. That is the very first step in negotiations, because if the listing agent is happy to work with you, they're going to represent your offer when they share it with their seller in a much, much better light. Now, when it comes to offering a fair price, I mean, this really gets into our comparative market analysis, understanding what's happening in the market, valuing the home properly, and then communicating that, hey, seller, because I don't have a buyer agent, I'm not looking for an additional 2 to 3% that needs to go to a buyer's agent. Instead, I am looking to leverage that towards closing cost credit, or I am looking to reduce the purchase price by this amount. Your net is the same, or I'm making my offer stronger than competitive offers because there's no buyer agent to pay. The big thing that you want for the listing agent and for the seller to consider is that, okay, I'm going to make the same amount of money by working with you as an unrepresented buyer than I would working with somebody else that had an agent. And in some cases, I've even had DIY home buyers that have maybe the seller was willing to pay a 3% commission to a buyer agent. And so what the buyer, the DIY buyer, has done is they have said to the agent, here's what I'd like to do. I would like to get a 2.5% closing cost credit from the seller. And I'd also like a 0.5% to go to you as the listing agent for helping facilitate the transaction with me as the customer. And what this does is, yeah, it puts a little bit of extra money in the listing agent's pocket, but it also gets them, like it or not, I mean, it does get them on your side a bit more, and that will really help them be more eager to work with you and see to it that the transaction goes through smoothly. But you really just need to remember that no matter what kind of tough exterior the listing agent might show, whatever resistance they may initially seem to have towards working with a self-represented buyer like you, at the end of the day, their goal is to help their client sell their house. And that's maybe what you need to remind them of if things get difficult, but just make it so that you both have a common goal. You are trying to find a way forward where the seller is able to sell their house at a price that they find acceptable, and you are able to purchase the house at a deal that feels fair and reasonable, and really emphasize that fairness and that you won't settle for anything less than what is fair. And of course, the more information that you have to back the offer price that you are making because of market research that you've done or rationale that you're able to give, the better it will go. The big thing is just to keep emotions out of it. And we'll talk about that because one of the questions later on here is, how do you deal with an emotional seller? So I'll dive deeper there. But the more that you can be objective, the more that you can approach the situation with a win-win attitude, looking for a collaborative kind of solution, the more that you can share, hey, this is my limitation. I see that these other homes have sold at this price. And in those cases, there was a buyer agent. Since there's no buyer agent for me, this is the only price that I feel is fair. I'm not willing to pay more than that. So, talk with your seller and let's come up with, like, how would they solve this problem kind of deal. A lot of times sellers like it when you well, I don't know if they like it actually, but a lot of times when you have the seller try and come up with the solution, it helps them put themselves in your shoes, see things less emotionally, more reasonably, and it creates this collaborative sort of culture that tends to get more deals done than when you approach negotiations from a combative sort of perspective. Question number 5 has to do with legal paperwork and contracts. So, what are the biggest pitfalls to avoid when handling purchase agreements and legal documents myself? And how can I ensure that I am not missing critical clauses or protections? I love this question because that real estate is it is contractual, and contracts have real legal consequences. I know that we are so used to just agreeing to terms and conditions on every online service that we use, but a real estate contract does carry much greater weight. And if you're not paying attention to what's in there, you could have all of your earnest money on the line. You could lose 7, 10, however many thousands of dollars you put up as earnest money. If you don't adhere to the terms of the contract, you could lose all of that. And in the worst case scenarios, sellers could come after you for a lot more than that. So understanding the purchase and sale agreement is very important. And that is something that I help folks with one-on-one and within the DIY Homebuyer Academy. Of course, I am not your real estate attorney. And so every now and again, there's situations where it does make a lot of sense to involve a real estate attorney. They still bill at an hourly rate that's going to be way less than hiring a traditional real estate agent. And note this as well, real estate agents are not attorneys. They cannot speak to things legally. Yes, they have familiarity with the standardized contracts, but they do not replace the services of a lawyer. Now, when it comes to actually getting the contracts and forms, this is something the listing agent can provide you with, the standardized contract. They may say that they can't because they're copyrighted forms, but you need to remind them that they're treating you as a customer and that they can provide the forms in service to their client. That's part of what their client is paying for, is for them to show you the customer service of helping you with the forms. And I can't tell you how to fill them out, but they can explain what each line means and define some of the terms for you. And just furnishing you with those standard forms is really valuable. So what I would do is go through those with the listing agent. Let them know what contingencies you want, namely a inspection contingency, a financing contingency, a title contingency. And then, of course, if you have anything special about like if it's a large piece of land, you might want a survey contingency to make sure the boundary lines are right. Or if you've got high insurance in your area, you might want an insurance contingency to make sure that it's an insurable property at a rate that you can reasonably afford. There's some of those special contingencies that you may want in there, but you're going to need to tell the listing agent, hey, these are all of the things that I want included, and they'll be able to provide you with those as long as you're the one dictating what it is that you want. And then before you sign any of those documents and send it to the seller, that's where you can work with me, or you can have a real estate attorney review all of those documents for you to just make sure that your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, that you've thought through the different protections, like the rent back, for instance, would be one that you want to make sure you've got good understanding of. But it's not terribly difficult to get access to these forms using the listing agent. They should provide you with those. And when in doubt, hire a real estate attorney to go over things with you. Next question here, financing as a DIY buyer. How can I best prepare to work with lenders as a self-represented buyer? And are there any financing options or programs that are particularly suited for those who are going at it alone? So the best lenders to work with as a self-represented buyer, I truly believe, are local lenders that you have access to, where it's really easy to pick up the phone, talk with them about questions, a lender that you're comfortable with, and that you see them as a teammate in the home buying process, because the lender really is, they're going to be there every step of the way with helping you think through the affordability of the house, not just your principal and interest payments, but also thinking about things like taxes and insurance. Really bring them in as somebody that you can look to, not exactly as a financial planner. It's good to work with a financial planner as well on these matters, but somebody who knows what your goals are as a home buyer, a lender that respects those goals, and that's going to work with you within the budget and confines that you have set. They're also going to help keep things on track once you're under contract for a home, because it's really important to them that all of the underwriting happens on time and that they get appraisals out, and that they're protected. And by them being protected, part of that is also protecting you. So this is why I really recommend self-represented buyers have a high-touch lender that you really like working with. And sometimes the fees are a little bit higher for these local lenders, but that's just where you got to weigh if it's worth it, because usually we're talking the difference of a few $100s, and you're already saving a ton of money by not having a buyer's agent. So you might as well have a good lender. Now, unfortunately, I am not aware of any programs that will give you a discount for being self-represented. I don't know of any special financing options that are only available to self-represented buyers. But I do know that any programs that are available to a represented buyer are also going to be available to you. Number 7, handling inspections and repairs. The question is, without an agent to coordinate, how should I approach hiring inspectors, interpreting reports, and negotiating repairs with sellers to avoid unexpected costs post-purchase? This is great. You, as a self-represented buyer, will hire your home inspector directly, and you should actually be researching these folks even before you go to contract, because as soon as you're in contract, one of the very first phone calls that you want to make is to your ideal home inspector. And the best home inspectors, oftentimes their schedule books up really fast. So you want to be able to call them right away so that you have as much time as possible between them getting in and actually doing the inspection and when your contingency ends, in case you need to have further inspections, or in case you need time to get bids, quotes, or just strategize what you're going to do with the house. Looking at online review. I mean, this sounds so simple, but looking at online reviews and then actually calling home inspectors, asking them if they've got different specialties, how long they've been in the business, what their licenses are. You'll kind of get a feel for who's good, who's not. Ask them about the kind of reports that they give. All of that is really just helpful in determining who you actually want to work with. But the point is, you will hire your own inspector, you will schedule that and try and get that done within the first few days, ideally, of being in contract. Now, once you get the report back, then you can decide if you're going to have any other specialists out or if you're going to try and negotiate repairs or credits with the seller. And here's the thing. When it comes to negotiating repairs, one of the ways to view it is put yourself in the seller's shoes and ask, what would I think is a reasonable request, right? And if you think it would be reasonable for a buyer to ask for because it's some sort of a safety concern, or like the roof is actively leaking, or there's moisture in the crawl space or in the basement that any other buyer would probably want to have remedied before buying the house, well, definitely ask for those things. If it feels like nickel and diming, like there's some blemishes in the drywall or some areas that need touch-up paint, there's some cracking in the grout in the tile for the bathroom, those are things that, unless there's a ton of them, most of those I would say let that go. Sellers do not appreciate being nickel and dimed, just like you wouldn't appreciate that. You're buying a used home. There are going to be some cosmetic imperfections. But if the inspection reveals anything major that would be a safety concern or that would affect the livability or your enjoyment of the home, or is going to create a major expense, $10,000 or more within the first few years of ownership, and that fundamentally changes the math on whether or not it makes sense for you to buy this home, then absolutely you should ask the seller to repair or make credits for these things. And in terms of which one to go with, the downside to asking the seller to do the repairs is that, of course, they're going to hire the cheapest people that they can possibly find. And a lot of times, too, the work that they have done, the warranties won't be transferable to you as the new owner. The nice thing, though, is that you could have those problems solved before you ever move in. On the credit side, whether that's reducing the purchase price or getting some sort of a closing cost credit, that could leave more cash in your bank account to deal with those problems, to find your own contractors and people to do the work. The main thing is that that's where you're going to really want to get bids in advance so that you know how much a roof replacement is or how much it's going to be to add a new electrical panel to the house. Whatever it is that you want to have done, you want to have those objective numbers before you agree to a seller credit, just to make sure that that seller credit is going to cover enough of those repairs for the deal to still make sense. The big thing is when you're negotiating repairs, don't be afraid to walk away from a home that has major issues, especially if you just don't want to deal with them, or if it's going to make it so that the home is no longer affordable for you when you consider the long-term costs of ownership. Don't be afraid to end the agreement based upon your inspection contingency. That would get you your earnest money back and the search could continue. If there's a question mark about whether or not this makes sense, then definitely try and negotiate with the seller before just pulling out, because you might be surprised. They might be willing to replace the roof or give you a $25,000 credit on top of what they've already given you. Involve your lender in those conversations as well, though, because there may be things that the lender's appraiser, like especially if it's an FHA or VA loan, the lender will send out an appraiser. And if the appraiser says, yeah, the roof is shot, needs to be replaced before we can approve the loan on this home, well, then negotiating credits doesn't do a whole lot for you. The lender won't allow you to buy the home until these things are fixed. So involve your lender in the discussions on how to best negotiate repairs. Moving right along, market research for fair pricing. The question says, what resources or methods do you teach at the DIY Homebuyer Academy for accurately assessing a home's market value to avoid overpaying, especially in fluctuating markets? This is great. There's a lot of online tools, but the number one thing that we look at is recent closed sales of comparable homes. Unfortunately, a lot of this information is public on sites like Zillow and Redfin, or even in your local county records. There's only a few states that don't show what homes have recently sold for, but most states, I think 41 states in the US, do show that information. And that is the best data that we have, because we can see, okay, what did these other homes in the neighborhood sell for? What does that tell us about the approximate value for this home? And the other things that we're going to look at are, because anything that has recently sold probably went to contract at least a month, maybe a month and a half, 2 months earlier. So all of the closed sale data is it's actually telling us what the market looked like about 1 to 2 months ago. So then how do we take that data and compare it to what's actually happening in the market today? And that's where we want to look at, okay, how many active listings are there? How long are those listings staying on the market? If the days on market seems to be a growing number, that houses are sitting longer, well, then that's going to give you more competitive advantage as a buyer. But if homes are still selling within a week, well, then you know it's a really hot and competitive market, and your offer will likely need to reflect that. So there are a lot of tools, frankly, more than I can give in just the scope of this singular podcast. But fortunately, that's why the DIY Homebuyer Academy exists, is so that I can teach you how to use free, publicly available tools to do market research, both on specific homes as well as on neighborhoods, areas, so that you can really get a feel for what a home is worth before you make an offer, and even defend that valuation that you come to in the negotiation process. Question number 9. How do I deal with emotional sellers? This happens a lot. The question actually reads, sometimes sellers are emotionally attached to their homes. As an unrepresented buyer, how can I navigate these situations to keep negotiations professional and productive? I don't want to repeat myself, but I did kind of flag that this question was coming. And you have to recognize that because most sellers have lived in their home and they've done a lot to it, they've got a lot of memories, and who knows what else is going on in the background for them and why they're moving. Sellers do typically attribute a lot of emotional value to their home. And one of the worst things that you can do as the potential buyer is to undermine or downplay that. And so what I find to be most effective in the negotiations is to, wherever you can, validate the emotions of that you recognize how much this home and this place has meant to them, but then try and bring the conversation back to objective data. And you can gently, whether it's through the listing agent, however these conversations go, just in your communications, you can gently recognize that, hey, I can see that the seller has put a lot of care into this. And I can see that they added things like a pool that were very, very significant to them. And while I don't undermine that, those things don't carry the same significance for me. And as I compare this home to other things that have recently sold, and as I compare it to my situation and what I'm actually able to and willing to pay for the home, we have this gap. And so I'm not trying to be mean or cause a problem for your sellers, but I am just saying there are limitations on what it is that I'm willing and able to do. So how do we bridge this gap? And again, what you're really trying to do is, without offending the seller, you're trying to validate their emotions, but get them back to a place of viewing the sale with some degree of objectivity. And hopefully they have a good listing agent who's able to communicate those things to them as well. But the big thing that you want to avoid is getting caught up in the emotions. You don't want to do anything that makes it adversarial or combative, or being like, you guys are fools, or you guys are so emotionally wrapped up in this, or that pool means nothing to me. That just doesn't help move the negotiations or the conversation forward. So be respectful, and also don't be afraid to hold your ground, because you have come to a well-reasoned position on what the home is worth to you. And if you can't get to that number, then don't be afraid to walk away. There are always more homes that are coming on to the market. And so if you've got to be patient, that is far better to walk away from a deal that doesn't make sense than to try and stretch yourself to force something. You don't want to be in that position. You don't want to bring that financial hardship or stress upon yourself. I'm saying that as somebody who's gone through it personally, and somebody who's worked with tons and tons of home buyers. Don't overstretch yourself for a home. Don't agree to a deal that doesn't rationally make sense to you. And also check your emotions and make sure that you're not being ludicrous when it comes to the data that you are using. Like, don't use comps that aren't actually comparable in any way, shape, or form to the property that you want to buy, just to be difficult. That's not going to get you anywhere either. Final question: post-purchase considerations. After closing without an agent, what immediate steps should I take to ensure a smooth transition, like transferring utilities or addressing any undisclosed issues with the property? So right before closing, like within 24 hours before closing, make sure you do a final walkthrough. And in this final walkthrough, you're just making sure that any repairs that you've agreed to are completed, that there is no new damage to the home, or that once they lifted up rugs or furniture, that there isn't like, whoa, there's this major water leak that we never saw. That needs to be addressed. And if there are those issues, you need to let the listing agent and the title company, or your escrow officer, or the attorney that's overseeing things, you need to let them know right away that there are problems that need to be remedied before you're willing to close on the home. Now, in most all cases, that final walkthrough goes great. So you probably have nothing to worry about. And in that case, then the big things are, yes, getting your utilities transferred over to start the day that you take possession of the property, making sure that you have your mail transfer set up, that you understand how you're going to get mail keys if it's a community mailbox, or where you pick up your mail, asking questions about other services, like if there's internet for the property, making sure that that gets set up. If there's any equipment that's leased, like a propane tank, who is that leased from? How is that filled? You also want to just think through changing out your locks and home security, getting all of those things rolling. And then your inspection report, anything that the seller didn't take care of. There's too many home buyers and homeowners that just, once they have their inspection report, they throw it away or they forget about it. And that thing is like a precious resource, because it tells you all of the maintenance items that you need to do to prevent further damage or harm to your home. So keep that in a safe spot, or put together some sort of a schedule somewhere where you are going to be mindful of, oh yeah, there are these little issues that, if left untended to, will eventually become really big issues, and have a game plan for ticking those things off so that you can have years and years of enjoyment in your home. Because I'm telling you, preventative maintenance saves you tons and tons of money rather than letting issues fester. All right. That is a ton that we have covered in this episode. I trust that it is helpful. I also trust that it's created a whole set of new questions that we will address another 10 episodes from now. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do connect with me at the DIY Homebuyer Academy. You can find links to that down in the description. Before you go, subscribe, share, leave a comment, leave a review. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for coming along.